Overseer Urena Cast stood at the edge of the observation platform, staring down at a scoreboard that made absolutely no sense. 41 human recruits. 6 weeks into a training program specifically engineered to break them. A program with a survival rate, historically, of 60% for even the hardiest species in the coalition. And there, glowing on the board in front of her, was a number her translator initially refused to render correctly. Human survival rate, 100%. Not because the Deathworld had gone easy on them. The medical bay behind her held 11 recruits with broken bones, 2 with venom exposure, 1 recovering from a collapsed lung. They had bled, they had suffered. And somehow, every single one of them was still alive, still laughing, still comparing bruises like trophies. "Explain this," Urena said to her aide, jabbing a claw at the board. Her aide, a nervous thrall technician named Doskus, swallowed hard. "Overseer, they've turned the survival trials into a game. They call it the leaderboard. They're competing to see who can survive the most dangerous encounter." Urena's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "They're not afraid." "No, Overseer," Doskus said quietly. "They're having fun." 6 weeks earlier, none of the Coalition had any idea what they were about to unleash on themselves. The Kalan Coalition had run Deathworld training for 200 years, using the planet Vrashgul 9 as a filtration system for its military academy Euros, a jungle world of carnivorous flora, apex predators the size of transport vehicles, and a gravity well 20% heavier than most species found comfortable. Recruits were sent for 6 weeks with minimal equipment. Those who survived earned command positions. Those who didn't became cautionary statistics. It was designed to break the weak before they could endanger a unit in real combat. It had never been designed with humans in mind. Humanity's admission into the Coalition had come only 2 years earlier, following humanity's unexpected diplomatic contact and a brief, tense evaluation period. Most Coalition officers viewed the new species with polite skepticisms. Euros, a species with natural weapons without exceptional strength, hailing from a world that, by Coalition standards, was aggressively mundane. General Threxa Mole, commanding officer of the Deathworld program, had personally requested humanity's first cohort be sent to Vrashgul 9, without modification to the standard protocol. "If they cannot survive what every other species survives," she told the Coalition Council, "then their admission was premature. It was meant as a test of humanity's worth." It became instead a test of the Coalition's assumptions. Nobody expected the humans to treat their own survival trial like a sport. The 41 recruits dropped onto Vrashgul 9 in 6 transport pods, immediately scattering across 9 kilometers of dense jungle canopy, exactly as protocol demanded a Euros. Recruits were meant to survive alone, proving individual capability before being permitted to regroup. Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado, the cohort's informal leader by virtue of prior military service back on Earth, activated her comm unit within the first hour and did something no previous species had ever attempted during Deathworld training. She broadcast on an open channel to every other human pod. "This is Delgado. Sound off, and somebody tell me what's trying to eat you right now." Within 20 minutes, all 41 recruits were sharing real-time intelligence Euros, predator locations, plant toxicity readings, terrain hazards Euro. Across a network the Coalition's own monitoring systems hadn't anticipated humans establishing so quickly. "They're communicating," Urena observed from the platform, stunned. "Coordinating. That violates the isolation clause of the trial." General Threxa studied the data feed, unreadable. "The isolation clause exists to prevent recruits from relying on others instead of proving individual strength. Then they're cheating." "Or," Threxa said slowly, "they've decided cooperation is a strength worth proving." It was a distinction that would matter more than either of them yet understood. By the end of the first week, the humans had done something Deathworld training had never seen in 2 centuries. They'd mapped nearly 40% of Vrashgul 9's most dangerous territory, sharing the data freely, warning each other away from confirmed threats, rather than treating every discovery as a private advantage. Private Jonah Achibi, the cohort's youngest recruit at 19, nearly died on day 4 when a pack of triclawed Skorath predators cornered him against a ravine. He survived only because Delgado's network alerted 3 nearby recruits, who arrived within minutes Euros, technically violating isolation protocol a second time, technically saving his life. The rescue sparked something unexpected among the recruits. Competition, but not the kind Deathworld training was designed to produce. Instead of competing to be the strongest individual survivor, the humans began competing to record the most dangerous rescue, The cleverest trap survived. The best story to bring back to the others. They built a scoreboard using salvaged equipment, awarding points for creativity under pressure rather than raw combat prowess. Achibi's near-death encounter, once tallied, earned him the nickname Ravine, which he wore with more pride than embarrassment. This is not how the trial is meant to function, Doscus reported nervously to Urena. They are treating catastrophe as entertainment. Urena watched the humans' footage in silence. Ayura recruits laughing over shared rations after near-fatal encounters, comparing wounds like badges rather than failures. What the Coalition failed to understand was that laughter, for humans, had never meant the absence of fear. General Threxa Mole grew increasingly convinced the humans were mocking the trial's purpose entirely, and by the fourth week, she made a decision that would nearly cost her command. She ordered an unscheduled escalation, releasing a young but fully grown Kesserith apex predator Euros, a species normally reserved for the trial's final week, if used at all Euros, directly into the sector where the largest cluster of human recruits had regrouped. It was meant to remind them Vrashkul 9 was not a game. The Kesserith stood 4 meters at the shoulder, armored in bone plating no standard weapon could penetrate, and it emerged from the jungle canopy directly into the recruits' camp at dusk. What followed wasn't chaos. It was, disturbingly to Irena watching from orbit, coordination. Delgado's team didn't scatter. They executed a plan already rehearsed during 2 prior close calls. 3 recruits drawing the creature's attention along prearranged sightlines while 2 others, working from data Achibi had gathered days earlier about the Kesserith's only vulnerable point, a narrow gap in its lower jaw plating, moved into position with improvised spears. It took 4 minutes. No fatalities. 1 recruit, a former combat medic named Sarah Kwan, suffered a fractured wrist diving clear of the creature's tail Euros. An injury she'd later mark on the leaderboard with visible pride, calling it worth every point. General Threxa had just proven, in the worst possible way, exactly what she'd been trying to disprove. The footage of the Kesserith encounter reached Coalition Command within hours, and the reaction wasn't the vindication Threxa expected. Council members who had approved humanity's Deathworld assignment as a formality now watched 41 recruits neutralize a creature that had killed 6 prior Coalition candidates in the program's history Euros, using teamwork, prior data sharing, and a plan built entirely on trust and intelligence gathered by someone else. Overseer Irena requested an emergency audience with General Threxa. You escalated the trial beyond authorized parameters, she said. You endangered 41 recruits to prove a personal theory. I endangered them to protect the integrity of 2 centuries of training, Threxa said, though her voice carried less certainty than her words. They protected each other instead of proving what you wanted them to prove, Irena said. Perhaps that is exactly what should have been tested from the beginning. Threxa's greatest failure was about to become the Coalition's greatest discovery about the species it had almost dismissed. By the final week, word of the human cohort had spread through the Coalition's Academy network, and observers from 3 other species requested permission to review the humans' shared data logs Euros, an unprecedented request in the program's history. What they found wasn't reckless bravado, but a survival system every recruit had voluntarily built and maintained, shared intelligence, mutual accountability. A scoreboard that rewarded protecting others as highly as it rewarded personal survival. Delgado, summoned before the Coalition Review Board on the final day, was asked directly why the humans had transformed the deadliest trial in Coalition history into what observers were now calling, with growing respect, the human method. Where I'm from, she said, we learned a long time ago that the people who survive the worst situations aren't the ones who face them alone. They're the ones who make sure nobody else has to. General Threxa Mole, present at the review, said nothing for a long moment. Then, for the first time in her career, she formally recommended the Deathworld Training Protocol be revised Euros, not to make it easier, but to measure something it had never measured before. The Coalition had sent humans to a Deathworld designed to break them. Instead, it had discovered exactly what made them impossible to break. 6 months later, the revised Deathworld Training Protocol bore a new name across Coalition academies. The Delgado Standard, requiring every future cohort Euros, regardless of species Euro, to demonstrate cooperative survival alongside individual endurance. Jonah Achibi, promoted ahead of recruits twice his age, kept the old scoreboard from Vrashkul 9 mounted in his academy quarters, a reminder of the night he'd nearly died and the people who'd refused to let him. Maria Delgado stood before the next cohort of recruits Euros, human and alien alike, the first mixed-species class in Coalition history Euros, and offered them the only piece of advice she believed actually mattered. Survival isn't a contest you win alone, she said. It's a promise you keep together. Everything else is just noise. The scoreboard behind her updated in real time, and for the first time in 2 centuries, it measured something Vrashkul 9 had never been designed to find. Not who was strongest, but who could be trusted.